All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating framework that comes from our source material. It actually uses one of the most mind-bending ideas from quantum mechanics as a way to explain a model of reality found in the Quran.
So here's the big question. How in the world could Schrödinger's cat, that famous quantum thought experiment, have anything to do with a theological framework of existence? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today. And the model proposed by our sources is surprisingly detailed. First, let's do a quick refresher on Schrödinger's cat. So, it's a thought experiment, right? Imagine a cat is sealed in a box with some poison that might be released. Quantum mechanics tells us that until we actually open that box and look, the cat is in what's called a superposition. It's both alive and dead at the same time. It's only the act of observing, of looking, that forces reality to pick a lane. That core idea, the observer collapsing all the possibilities into one single reality, that's the key thing to hang on to.
Now, to be super clear, this explainer isn't about trying to prove quantum physics with the Quran. Not at all. Instead, the source material uses this very paradox, the box, the cat, the observer, as a powerful analogy, a kind of blueprint to lay out a complete architecture for life, death, and divine will.
So here's our game plan. We'll start with the paradox itself, then we'll map its parts to the Quranic model. After that, we'll look at the rules inside this conceptual box, the role of the observer who's outside, and finally, what the whole point of this setup is supposed to be.
So, let's kick things off by exploring how this quantum puzzle is used not as a science problem, but as the very framework for understanding reality in this specific model.
Okay, let's move into our second section. This is where things get really interesting, because we're going to map the pieces of that thought experiment directly onto the key players described in this Quranic framework.
And here is where that analogy just clicks into place. The sealed box, well, that's equated with al-Kitāb, or the mother of the book, a sort of divine ledger of all possibilities. The cat, in its uncertain state, represents the nafs, or the soul. Its potential alive state is called Rahīm, which signifies mercy and continuity, and the dead state is Razim, which means separation or oblivion. And of course, the most crucial part, the observer outside the box, the one with the power to collapse the state into one reality, is Allah.
So if that's the setup, what are the rules inside the box? What's the physics of this place? Well, the framework says there are two fundamental fields that govern everything happening inside the system.
This slide shows us the core physics of the model. You've got a light field, which represents timeless, divine command, and a sound field, which represents our temporal, lived experience. But here's the critical difference, the asymmetry. The light field is an eternal loop. It begins with Allah and it ends with Allah. But the sound field, our reality, our timeline, it begins with Allah but can actually terminate inside the box.
And this isn't just an abstract idea. The framework points directly to this verse from the Quran as the proof for this termination. The state of being in oblivion, forgotten, is presented as a real ontological death inside the system. It's the sound field hitting a literal dead end.
So, the key takeaway is this. From the perspective of the cat inside the box, death is a final, total termination of experience. Because the sound field ends there, the cat can't revive itself. It's game over. Only the external observer, who also controls that eternal light field, can bridge the gap and restart the connection.
And that brings us to the real game changer, the observer. This section is all about the exclusive powers of the authority who exists outside the box and, crucially, is not bound by any of its rules.
According to the framework, the observer has these four exclusive powers, each one tied to a Quranic verse. The power to create reality with a simple command, the power to kill or terminate a state, the power to revive a state that was terminated, and even the power to substitute one state entirely for another. These are things that can only be done from outside the system.
And if you want to see this in action, the Quranic story of Khidr is presented as the perfect case study. He does things that, from our perspective inside the box, seem totally bizarre or even wrong. He damages a perfectly good boat, ends a young boy's life, and fixes a random wall. But according to this framework, each one of those acts is an external intervention, an override of the normal flow of events for a better, unseen outcome. So how do these interventions even happen? The model proposes a mechanism it calls as-sad. It's described as a hidden, inaccessible channel. Think of it as a kind of divine backdoor or a teleportation channel that the observer uses to directly reach in and alter states inside the sealed box, pulling off those substitutions we just talked about. Okay, so we've got a sealed system.
an external observer with total control, and a secret channel for intervention. This brings us to the final and maybe biggest question. Why? Why set it all up this way? This section explains the ultimate purpose of the whole thing.
This slide really gets to the core tension of the model. Inside the box, we feel agency. We have the experience of being in control of our lives. But the framework argues that this is a necessary illusion for the system to work. The ultimate reality, as backed by these verses, is that the final say always rests with the observer.
So the why is that it's a test. The source says that this whole drama, life and death, choice and consequence, is a staged test to see who is best indeed. And here's the really crucial part. Even though the setup is controlled from the outside, the experience of being tested from the inside is completely 100% real for the participant.
Let's look at a few examples of how these different fates can play out. The framework points to Noah's son as a dead state, a state that was terminated and not replaced. Then you have Yahya, or John the Baptist, who represents a respawn, a brand new alive state created from a barren situation, using that hidden channel. And finally, Musa, or Moses, who after collapsing on the mountain represents a revival, a state that was terminated and then fully restored by the observer.
So let's put all the pieces together and take one final look at the complete architecture of this entire conceptual model.
So here's the whole shebang in one view. You have the box, which contains all possibilities. You have the two fields that govern its physics. You have the secret channel for divine intervention. You have the test as its ultimate purpose. And finally, you have the observer, who is defined as being outside of and in total control of the entire thing. In this model, the observer scripts the play, and the box performs it.
And that leaves us with this one final big question to think about. If, according to this framework, the entire drama of existence is a controlled test staged by an all-powerful external observer, does that make the stakes any less real for the cat inside the box? It's a question that really sits at the very heart of this incredible model.